sorry.
I call to order the Plan Commission meeting of April 28, 2020. We'll proceed with roll call.
Mr. Foster?
Here.
Okay, yes.
Mr. Holman?
Here.
Mr. Schumacher?
Here.
Mr. Coots?
Here.
Ms. Lazaris?
Here.
Mr. Magnuson?
Here.
Mr. Grady?
Here.
All right, thank you. All right, next item, number 3. I'd like to take this as a 3A and 3B, if you would. That first, the correction and or approval of the minutes of February 25, 2020. Is there a motion concerning the February 25 minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion concerning the February 25 minutes? In that case, we'll proceed with a roll call vote.
Mr. Holman?
Aye.
Mr. Schumacher?
Aye.
Mr. Coots?
Aye.
Ms. Lazaris?
Aye.
Mr. Magnuson?
Abstain.
Mr. Grady?
Abstain.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Aye. In that case, we'll go on to 3B, which is a correction and or approval of the minutes of April 13, 2020.
I'll move to approve the April 13th meeting minutes.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of April 13. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, then we'll proceed with roll call vote.
Mr. Schumacher?
Aye.
Mr. Coots?
Aye.
Ms. Lazaris?
Aye.
Mr. Magnuson?
Abstain.
Mr. Grady?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Holman?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
All right, thank you. The next item number 4, questions and public comment. We do have 2 people in the physical audience. The public may address the commission at this time regarding items on the agenda unless the item is the subject of a public hearing. We do have one public hearing this evening, and it is item number 5. Conditional Use Request by Dog and Shrub Distillery, LLC for outdoor service of alcoholic beverages at 145 Industrial Drive, Parcel 246-0714-1824-000. Public comment may also be made at this time if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting. Is there anyone who wishes to make a comment at this time? Hearing none, then we do go on with item number 5, and I see that the Campbells are here. This
Pam?
is number 5, public hearing. Yep.
There are only plan commissioners and staff on, so there's nobody else online. So I don't think we'll have any comment from online.
No, no one else is online. We just have the 2 people physically present.
Okay.
So, no, that's fine. All right. Number 5, public hearing, conditional use request, Dog and Shrub Distillery, LLC, for the purpose to serve alcoholic beverages outside the tasting room, and that access be granted to the entire property located at 145 Industrial Drive, Parcel 246-0714-1824-000. The public hearing is open. I see that Rob and Kim Campbell are here. Do either of you wish to make a comment at this time? All right. And at this, I'd like to call on Mr. Wolf to go over to just present the request.
Thank you, Pam. So the the item is obviously located in the industrial park. The property is zoned planned industrial. The conditional use is for the kind of serving or consumption of alcohol outside of very specific areas that are allowed within this zoning district, and that is the beer garden or a beer garden-like entity, a tasting area attached to the building is permissible. But when we look at consumption elsewhere on the grounds, the conditional use needed to come into play for review by the Plan Commission for the operational plan for the site. The petitioners have requested the ability to have alcohol consumption on the grounds generally to align with a number of different activities that they want to conduct on the site. They're going to be growing some of the materials that they use for distilling their liquors on the grounds. They do have future expansion plans. Those materials were provided to the Plan Commission and are available online for review. Again, it's about a number of kind of future operations that they have anticipated to attract customers and activity and tourism to their site. The kind of in a nutshell, the concerns that the staff has with this is that it's a 10-acre site. It's a very large site. Now, that doesn't mean that the petitioners have plans to utilize all the 10-acre sites, but for consumption. But that is the way that their request reads, and the memo that was provided and made available to the public kind of spells out that their request certainly is in keeping with the comprehensive plan to try to attract regional tourism to the area, and the staff is fully supportive of that. The staff's concerns really come down to the kind of expansive area that would be allowed to have alcohol consumption. Really goes to the issue of what can the property owners kind of control when in operation, and then what could be enforced. And it's an expansive area that's being requested. The areas away from the patio or the beer garden, and I'll say we're referring it to as a beer garden is because that's how the zoning code refers to a patio where alcohol consumption could occur. So looking at beyond what's identified as the patio, which again would be, I'm going to say enclosed in a sense that it is demarcated by a fencing or some mechanism to delineate where consumption is intended or can occur, and again, where it cannot. So all of our concerns with the petitioner's request is being able to clearly illustrate where on the property consumption would occur that they can police or manage when patrons aren't under direct supervision of the owners. So what we've brought forward is they want to conduct tours of their site, which is all well and good, and that having consumption during a tour on the grounds is a very reasonable request. Because they will be, I'll say, quote unquote, supervised by an employee of the distillery while they're on a tour. Consumers aren't going to be out wandering around the grounds without someone watching them, so to speak. They have identified some areas where they want to have games and kind of outside activities, which is completely understandable. But again, the request was for a very large area, and the standard requirement for alcohol consumption outside of a building is that the area is demarcated. It is fenced or roped or some other mechanism to understand where alcohol consumption is appropriate and where it is not appropriate. And so that is really what is the concern from the staffing perspective here. Some supplemental information was provided, and I'm not sure how it was distributed to the plant commissioners, but it does show some areas where they have zones, zone 1 being to the west of the existing building, zone 2 being kind of the remainder of the grounds inside of the drainage area, which is a pretty large area, and then zone 3, which is their tour area where they'll be growing, cultivating plants. And this is the issue that the Plan Commission will need to weigh in on. The staff has identified, albeit somewhat arbitrarily, an area within 100 feet of the north and west sides of the distillery for outdoor consumption, an area that they could demarcate. Now, 100 feet by 100 feet is 10,000 square feet. That's a quarter acre. You expand that to 200 feet by 200 feet. That's an acre of area. And that may be appropriate if they can police it, if you will, if they can control it. I think that's the issue to be addressed. The recommendation that we made from a staffing perspective is that outdoor consumption should be permitted when on a tour of the grounds. And then we have listed the latest time that tours should likely occur, which is 8:30 p.m. That's pretty late. Even in the summer months, it starts getting dark at 9. I think 8:30 is pretty reasonable for an expanded tour area. But that's an item that should be discussed by zoning and planning. The second item is consumption within an area of the north and west sides of the manufacturing facility, tasting room, and beer garden. That amount of area should be clarified, and it should be, in staff's opinion, an area that can be roped or fenced or demarcated. And then the petitioner did provide very reasonable hours of operation for those areas, and I think that those are certainly acceptable from a staffing perspective for days of week, time and times of operations of kind of zone 1, what's identified as zone 1 and zone 2. So then again, we finally had asked for just some updated site planning that illustrates the tour area, and then if lighting is desired outside, which is again very reasonable, that they should provide some details for that. So again, only a handful of issues in the staff's eyes that really need to be focused on, but we are supportive of them having some level of outside consumption in association with activities adjacent to their building. A last note is they did talk about having larger events, charity events and things. The city, and I'll defer to both Steve and Attorney Drescher, the city has a process by which special events can occur, large events, charity events can occur, that there is a permitting process. It is a very, I'll say, navigable process to make sure that ingress, egress, parking, police service, et cetera, is all taken care of. So I don't feel there's a need to worry about that. I think it's just these handful of items associated with their limited outdoor activities near the building that they're asking for.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wolf. We are still in public hearing. Are there any comments regarding this request? Does anyone wish to make any comments concerning this request? Are there any comments concerning this request? All right, hearing none, we go on with item number 6, discussion recommendation on conditional use request, Dog and Shrub Distillery, LLC, for the purpose to serve alcoholic beverages outside the tasting room, and that access be granted to the entire property located at 145 Industrial Drive, Parcel 246-0714-1824-000. Plan Commissioners, you have in front of you motion 24-1. Rob and Tim Campbell, Dog and Shrub Distillery, 145 Industrial Drive. This motion sets forth that the city has certain land use and zoning standards and procedures as enabled by Wisconsin state statutes, and which include certain requirements for conditional uses. The conditional use request for an outdoor beer garden in the planned industrial district, city review, and tonight's public hearing. Motion 24-1 provides for a Plan Commission recommendation that the City Council approve this conditional use request, subject to, first, requirements outlined in the planner's memo, which Dustin did go over. 2, statutory requirements for distilleries. 3, applicable local ordinances. This motion also sets forth the findings necessary for approval. A, the use will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare. B, the use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity or substantially diminish and impair property values. C, the use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property. D, there are adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and or other necessary facilities. E, ingress and egress will be designed so as to minimize traffic congestion in the public street. F, the use shall in all respects conform to the applicable regulations of the district in which it is located. G, the use at its proposed location is in harmony with the purposes, goals, objectives, policies, and standards of the City of Lake Mills Comprehensive Plan. And H, the potential public benefits of the proposed use outweigh any and all potential adverse impacts. And we have a list of the recommendations in the memo that Mr. Wolf prepared. And then we also have the zones and the uses per zone that have been submitted by the Campbells. And recall that as the first condition that the petitioner meet the requirements outlined in the planner's memo. So this would really entail the Campbells working with Mr. Wolf on ensuring that these requirements are met. Are there any questions, observations, comments concerning the proposed motion?
Hey, Pam,
Does anyone wish? Sorry?
This is Foster. Did they say that the petitioners are in the audience?
Yes, the Campbells are here. Mm-hmm.
When it becomes appropriate, I wouldn't mind hearing from them on how the conditions we're looking at will affect them. So once we get a motion in place and stuff, I may want them to come up and give us their 2 cents worth on this. I agree.
Right. Is there a motion to suspend the rules and call on the Campbells to address your question? Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Ask the
Second.
Campbells. Who made the motion?
Wayne.
State the name again.
Wayne.
Who made?
Magnet.
Wayne. All right, thank you. Wayne made the motion. Who was the second?
I did, Greg.
All right, very good. I thank you. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right. If you would, Mr. Campbell, could you talk about your ability to work with the conditions that are set forward in the planner's memo?
Signing in. Yeah, I mean, part of what we did is originally propose the entire area just to start as a simple, a place, because of all the different events, and partly because we don't know what's going to be coming in the future. So then after we got the suggestions from Dustin from the 100 feet, what I did is I kind of went back and described a little bit more in detail about what was going to happen in each area. Because from our perspective, to just the arbitrary 100 feet was a little bit, we had some problems, and I can show you on the site map once we get to that point. But zone 1 would just be our normal outdoor patio that we have. Because of the driveway around it, it's kind of limited in space to about a 40 by 50 area, which if you're having a band or something in the future really, isn't all that large. So that was we took the hours that Dustin proposed under 2B, we thought were fine. Probably later than we would actually be out there. And then zone 2, what we did is we kind of looked at that as if we were to have some outdoor activities, to have cornhole games set up, or horseshoes, or whatever is the in game at the time that we would have kind of that area. And what we did with that one is we just took the ravine because it was a natural divider. Without having to set up ropes or do anything like that, we just thought it kind of made sense for us. I mean, I'm kind of looking at what Tyranina Brewing does, is they have, they don't have any ropes up or anything like that. They have natural barriers that are by the tree lines or shrubs or whatever. We plan on landscaping some of that area as well. And then the problem with the zone 2 is to the north of the driveway, because of the significant elevation that we had to raise the property to get above street height. There's a pretty good drop off, so we have to go fairly far away from the driveway to actually get to a flat location to be able to do this. We're thinking about in futures possibly having dinners involving, local purveyors, having somebody bring out food from Jefferson County and putting up a tent. So that's something that we were thinking about in the level 2, or if the 4th of July fireworks continue to stay out in the park, that would be an area where we would use. And I know it's part of a special event issue as well. But it's just a place where we, to expand and go beyond the patio if some people want to do some things. Zone 3, which is on the other side of the drainage ditch, that's where we do plan on growing some grains. I kind of put an arbitrary circle for touring area out there. I didn't put any dimensions on it because we don't have anything out there. But the idea would be just to walk out there, show people, what does wheat look like? What does rye look like? What does it look like, as we're bringing it into the distillery, basically grain to glass right on that property. And then I guess as a possible future for zone 3 would it be if we had a really large event. I'm thinking about maybe someday having a barbecue festival or something along those lines. And again, that's why I put in there for special events, those types of things. One of the problems with distilleries is, of course, with the laws is, like for wineries and breweries, you can give a temporary license to wineries and breweries to be able to consume alcohol in different locations. That does not exist for distilleries. So that's partly why I'm leaving this kind of open, is just so we have access to it, even if, just so we don't have to come back and do this, every time we want to have a special event. So that was my thinking behind the memo that I sent to Dan, I think late yesterday afternoon. So, and then I also did. Dustin had requested a lighting plan. I had also included that. We only have the outdoor patio because, as far as we're concerned, zone 2 and zone 3 would be closed zone 2 would be closed at dusk, and again, unless we're doing some type of special event. So. You have something?
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Plan commissioners and staff, are there any observations or comments after hearing Mr. Campbell speak to the requirements in the planner's memo?
Ms. Lazarus, this is Dustin.
Yes.
I just want to reiterate that any special events, and I'd ask Steve or Dan to kind of comment on this, any large special events that might occur in zone 3 would be under a separate permitting process that the city has. So I guess I'm not worried about those ideas, or I'd like to relay to the petitioner that those issues can be handled a little bit separately. The touring area, I don't think needs to be specifically defined because, again, whomever is out there as a customer will be with an employee. So I'm not worried about that. I really think that the focus for the Plan Commission should be the zone 2 area, is that acceptable? Are you comfortable with what can be controlled? Is there a way to demarcate it? I certainly concede that the 100 feet may not be acceptable based on some of the things that they've outlined. It's certainly 100 feet from the future patio and such is a long ways north, but I think the attention for the Plan Commission should really be on what's appropriate for the Zone 2 area. It seems like all the others have really been handled.
The special event permit probably covers the vast majority of these issues here. The tours are outside that. If they want to do tours, I don't think there's any issue there. But when you look at how the special event shows up, if you're putting up a tent, you have to have a building permit. If you are having a food truck or serving food of any type, you have to have a permit. So as you start looking at the operations that would go into most of Zone 2, they're probably sliding into the special event permit on a regular basis. And they probably will want to have at the beginning of the year, file a special event permit that covers all those planned outings. And because that allows the fire inspector and the building inspector and the neighborhood service officer and anybody who has to go out there and do some type of inspection to be able to know what dates they are and what they're looking for. Is the stage going up? Is there additional lighting? Is tents? All that kind of stuff starts to get into fire code. If they're running extension cords, they got to have a fire inspection. So, you know, if the patio is a general area, it's all set up and ready to go, that's great. If they're doing tours, I think that's, you know, there's nothing special going on but walking through the areas and looking at it during the daylight. It's when you start getting into any type of activity that expands beyond probably those two areas, which sounds like Zone 2, you're probably into a special event permit that they should just file at the beginning of the year with ideas. And if anything else comes up, they can come in and kind of expand on it a little bit. But really what that does is protect us from people getting involved in activities where they should have had a permit and didn't. You know, like on a stage, well, what big deal is there a stage? Well, if a stage collapses, the first person they go to is the building inspector and they want to sue him. If there's someone, you start a fire and they look and they see that it wasn't an appropriate extension cord, they're going to be looking at the building inspector or the fire inspector. If there's food problems, you know, again, it comes back to the city and what kind of permit was issued. If there's loud music out there, first thing they're going to want to know is, well, did they file that permit with the city? Because under that, the way it works under the city code is we have to look at the, you know, the noise and the impact and issue a permit on that. So I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm looking at it and going 1 and 3 are great. 2 might, you know, if it's just games out there, I don't see it as being any different than 1. But if they push into anything other than that, they might want to look at just setting up a standing special event permit.
All right. Are there any further comments or observations on the conditions for the conditional use?
And I see the drawing, you know, I see where we're talking on 1, Zone 2, and Zone 3, but the way that this is written, the conditions in the planner's memo still specify that 100 feet north and west, doesn't it?
Yes. So you would need to you would need to make some kind of modification to the motion to look at zones, the zoning, the zone 1, 2, and 3 issue, rather than the 100 feet.
I have been jotting down here for condition number 1 listed in the motion. Condition number 1 now reads that, of course, the petitioner shall meet the requirements outlined in the planner's memo. And I've been jotting this as the concept of petitioner shall submit a site plan defining outdoor activity areas to be approved by city staff. And I think as to other things like special events, I think that really is covered by condition number 3, the petitioner shall comply with all applicable local ordinances. And that could say to include special events. Would that kind of language do?
Can I ask a question?
Now, Mr. Campbell, go ahead.
So I guess, so if we're gonna put up some cornhole games or something like that on zone 2, is that, from my understanding is then we would need to stand in, from listening to how Steve talked about.
Do we have access to zone 2 or not until dusk? I guess that's what I understand all the special permit, and I understand, and that's partly why I was showing it was more our intent, but I'm just thinking about if we set up five sets of cornhole, because there's not room next to the distillery in the patio. You know, if we set that up on a Saturday, to me, that's not something we should need a special permit for, and I guess that was my question.
I think my understanding would be, and staff, please correct my understanding of what Mr. Campbell just said, but in where I have written in condition number 1, the petitioner shall submit a site plan defining outdoor activities areas to be approved by city staff. Would that cover what Mr. Campbell just asked about, that he would be able to, in that plan, to show areas where various outdoor games would be occurring, and then that would take care of what he just spoke about?
I guess from my standpoint, I'm good with that. I'd like to know what the screening is, so that's probably something we want to work on a little bit. But yes, the final phase, which is and you have to comply with all the other ordinances, basically says you'll need a special event permit, because the special event permit looks at all the other codes and says this is what permits are required under the other code, and have you picked them up? And so, yeah, I'm good with the way it's worded, and I think that they could do what he has suggested. I don't see any issue. Do you, Dustin or Dan?
I don't see any issue. I think distinguishing between temporary uses and special events is kind of the key thing here. If he just wants to access that area for games, so long as it's on the described site plan, I think you're covered.
I agree with Dan there. It's really just that tipping point between we're setting up some boards versus we're trying to do something more than that.
I'd like to be able to tell you more specifically
Where that's going to be, but unfortunately, as a building under construction, our final grading is not done. I don't know where the wet spots are going to be over there, those types of things. So as of right now, I can't give you much more specific. So
part of what I gathered from what Steve said is demarking the area, delineating it. He suggested screening of some sort, a site plan with, landscaping, whatever you're doing to control the area and isolate the use to that area is what he's looking for.
Yeah, as far as where you set up the board games, I don't think that any of us care. That's, you're going to want to look at the safety issues out there. But all I'm looking at is to know where the zone is and a general idea how you're going to demarcate it. And from there, I'm good. Unless the plan commissioners have something else, I think her motion covers everything I need.
All right, is there anything further from plan commissioners?
does the petitioner have everything he needs? Does he understand exactly what this is going to entail and what he'll have to do? And, you know, we're certain that he knows that every weekend he doesn't have to do a special event permit just to put games out there, right?
I think the way this is worded is, and what he will eventually be able to put together for the Sedgwick City staff is to show these areas and how they would be outlined and what he wants, what kind of games or what other outdoor activities he wants, and then that would be in that submitted site plan. And as he just mentioned, that he's going to arrive at that because of the other construction activities that are going to take place, and so then he's going to get to that site plan. But we know that if it's part of this motion, then that is going to be later submitted, and that it would be something that would be worked out with city staff, and it would show those areas, those outdoor areas. And then I think that item number 3, the petitioner should comply with all applicable local ordinances, including special event permitting, then that would be separate for maybe the kinds of events he spoke about before, where he would have special catered dinners and things like that, and that would be a special event or a fundraising event that he wanted. But otherwise, as a standard operation that would involve some outdoor games, he could have these areas defined.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern is we make this so complicated and convoluted. He'll have to come back every weekend to make sure he's in compliance with regulations. So that's the last thing that I want us to do here. So I just want to make sure everything is clear on this, and he knows what he has to do and what he won't be able to do without submitting other required documents for events and things like that. To me, it just seems like this is very, very complicated, overly complicated.
I'm gonna back up a little bit, Mike, because as you get used to what's going on and you're putting on events, you should probably be checking on a regular basis to see what is and isn't required, because they're, you know, I'm not gonna, if you say you're putting games out there, but one of those games requires you to run an extension cord, and you have an extension cord running 300 feet across the driveway into an area that's kind of wet, the fire inspector is probably going to want to know. The building inspector will probably want to know too, so that they can at least come out and stop by. That's generally what the special event permit does. Gives them an idea of what codes are applicable to what types of events. So if you're looking at a special event permit, you could look at it and say, well, none of that applies to me, but maybe one item or two items does, and that's where the code comes in, because the special event permit isn't really a code. The special event permit incorporates all the things in code that occur during these types of events. So if you went through the ordinance, you wouldn't find special event, this requires this, this, and this. But if you went to the fire code, or you went to the building code, or you went to the noise code, the nuisance codes, you would probably find everything that falls under the special event permit. So every weekend he's out there doing something, I can't guarantee that he's yes or no. It would probably be a good idea to call in and say, hey, I'm doing this weekend. Is there any issue? And after a while, you know, after a year or two, he's going to have a pretty good idea what he does and doesn't have to do. But as we start to move forward, I don't exactly know how he's setting things up, and he doesn't know exactly what codes are going to apply.
And Steve, if I can add, this all stems from alcohol consumption. So the owner of the building, of the operations, is responsible for all the people consuming alcohol on the site. And the further you get away from the buildings, the harder it is for the owner to control what's happening. I'm not, the worst case scenario is some 20 or 19-year-old kid is playing games and never comes into the building, but his buddy is serving him drinks. I mean, those are things that the city has to worry about. And so I don't think it's too onerous to say this is the area where games are going to occur and this is where alcohol consumption can occur, because we as the owners of the business can police this area. I think that is a very rational and reasonable expectation of a property owner whose business stems from sale of and consumption of alcohol. So combined with the special event things when things get bigger, to say, hey, this is our area for our games, don't leave here with alcohol, and we can get our employees out there to police it, is I think a very reasonable expectation.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with anything you guys have said. I just want to make sure that this process isn't unduly disruptive to their business and to their life to actually conduct business. So that's where I'm at on this. So I'm looking at both sides of it. We have to make sure it's secure and that things are in place, but we don't want to make it so difficult that people can't comply with it. So that's where I'm at with this. I want to make sure he understands what this will get him and what this won't get him. So when he moves forward, he knows that he'll have to call or whatever the case is, or other things that may happen or not happen on that property.
We have all these codes in place for other businesses, and when you go into the alcohol industry, you are so heavily regulated already. It's hard to figure out what's up and what's down. So from the standpoint of where we're at, we're pretty minimal. And in the long run, I think once he gets used to it, he's probably going to feel pretty comfortable with what we do and what we expect.
Perfect. Like I said, I'm okay with everything in here. I just wanted to make sure that everything was clear up front.
Okay. All right, Plan Commissioners, I'm going to read my two modifications again for this motion. For the first condition, it would then read, the petitioner shall submit a site plan defining outdoor activity areas to be approved by city staff. And then for the second one, it would be for number 3, the petitioner shall comply with all applicable local ordinances, including special event permitting. Those are the only two changes.
Pam, would you like a motion to amend the motion?
There hasn't been a motion yet, so.
Yeah, we haven't.
No.
Did you all hear Attorney Drescher's remarks? You can make a motion to pass this motion 24-1 as I've read it.
I'll make a motion to pass this motion as you read it.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to pass motion 24-1 as amended. Is there any further discussion? All right. Hearing none, then I'll proceed with roll call vote.
Mr. Coots?
Aye.
Ms. Lazares?
Aye.
Mr. Magnuson?
Aye.
Mr. Grady?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Holman?
Aye.
Mr. Schumacher?
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
All right, thank you. Next, we have item number 7, and rather similar, we also have item number 8. And these are discussion recommendations on changes occurring in a shoreland. Now, the first, item number 7, discussion recommendation on removal of vegetation and landscape plan review 517 Erinside, parcel 24607131142-064. And number 8 is discussion recommendation on extraterritorial review of Boathouse Walkway and landscaping plan, North 6787 Sunset Road, parcel 01807131113-004. In C, there is no conditional use public hearing for either one of these, and rather these are for us, before us, that we may determine whether conditional use is necessary. If we are to read the zoning ordinance, then conditional use is referred to for what is being proposed here. At the time that was done, and we go back to about 2014 or so, then whether that was the intent that that this level of change, this level of redoing something, would rise to the level of requiring a conditional use, and it would also be, I'd also be curious as to what has transpired in the past 5 to 6 years since the current regulations became effective. Certainly some work must have been approved by building permit on residential properties along the shoreland. So I guess first I'd like to call on Mr. Wolf to go over these cases one after the other, and then we can talk about what's in the code and the intentions that were laid forward at the time. So, Mr. Wolf.
Thank you, Ms. Lazaris. As you indicated, the code for removal of vegetation and such along the shoreline is, I'll say, pretty clearly laid out in the code. In essence, it is intended to avoid the possibility, which had occurred many years ago in the past, is someone generally clear-cutting their shoreline to make sure that they have maximized their views. So there is a very specific way that we look at, you can remove a certain percentage, a certain number of feet to give yourself access and visibility to and from the lake. A conditional use is not required in these instances unless you are putting up a new boathouse or substantially changing your boathouse, or removing the existing vegetation that is out there to a degree beyond what is spelled out in the code. And so the key there is to make sure that someone isn't removing mature trees, isn't removing shoreline cover in a detrimental way to the property, to the shoreline, and to the view to the properties from the lakes. But these are shore properties. These are sensitive. Neighboring property owners, anytime someone goes out and starts doing work on the shoreline, I'll say kind of heightens the activity. Emotions can kind of sometimes run high. We have not had, to my knowledge, issues in the past with these, but we don't get many that are associated with something outside of usually building a new boathouse or reconstructing a boathouse out there. And again, then we go through the conditional use process. Again, we get very robust landscaping plans and landscape replacement plans. So that's kind of the background on them. With these two items, and I'm going to start specifically with the one on Erinside, they have failing stairs that they want to replace. They have some aging shore cover, ground cover out there that they would like to replace. They are not proposing to remove any of the mature trees that are out there. They have provided a very detailed landscaping plan, which is something we of course require. we feel, from a staff perspective, that it does not elevate to the level of requiring a conditional use permit, necessitating public hearing. But that being said, we feel that it should be viewed by the Plan Commission to ensure kind of a transparent process and a trail, if you will, if a property owner neighboring property owner or someone did question what's going on out there and how it was approved. There are a couple of conditions that we're asking for in there, specifically that the property owner replace the removed vegetation areas with planting size to achieve a maximum initial ground cover, or what's feasible, and that in the interim, until mature growth is realized, as we can understand, it's going to take a couple of years for that to come in, that they use mulching or some other erosion control measure, could be matting. There's a number of things that could be done to ensure that the shore cover is maintained until the plantings grow in. But that said, the planting plan provided was reviewed by our landscape architect and met with his approval. And I can answer any questions on this specifically, but again, staff does feel that they've checked the boxes. They've been diligent about making sure that they're trying to achieve what's best for the shoreline in this case.
All right, and on the extraterritorial case?
On the extraterritorial case, again, a similar situation where the owners of the property are elderly and they wanted to make some improvements to improve safety to get down to the boathouse and to the water's edge. As you can see from the images that have been provided there, there's some retaining wall and a very kind of narrow staircase that is there, and some minimal lighting. The proposal is to improve the stairs and to improve the lighting for usability, accessibility in the long run. Again, these areas do kind of deteriorate over time, and again, they're proposing some nice improvements to the site. Couple of conditions that we're asking for is that we get a more detailed plant list and landscaping plan to specify the plants that they're going to be utilizing. So overall, it meets with the intent of the ordinance and the character. We feel it doesn't arise to the level of needing a conditional use for these kind of improved replacement stairs and landscaping, but we do need a little bit more detail before permits can be issued.
All right, all right. Mr. Wolf, do you think that any clarification to the code as it exists would be advised, or should we wait and see what else may come up?
It would be my recommendation that we wait and see. We have not had issues to date with what the code reads. We have not received, I'll say, a number of complaints from neighboring property owners. The code does clearly say removing more vegetation, and the expectation is mature trees, mature vegetation outside of the view corridor that's allowed on these properties. I think that as we get more of these, I think there'll be more comfort level to approve them at a staff level. But because it is the shore, because it is Rock Lake, we do recognize that they can be sensitive, and there should be more than just a staff review at this juncture.
All right, very well. So, plan commissioners, you have for the first one, Mono, the Lakeshore Vegetation Replacement at 517 Erinside Road. You have before you a prepared motion 24-2. The motion does set forth the city's zoning authority under state statutes, which include zoning within 75 feet of the ordinary high water mark. The request to replace plantings, crushed aggregate, stone, and sculpture. The city review and tonight's public hearing. The motion does provide for a plan commission recommendation that the city council approve the request subject to recommendations in the planner's memo, and Mr. Wolf did refer to replacing removed vegetative areas with planting size to achieve maximum initial ground cover as much as feasible. And second, utilizing mulch or other erosion control measures until mature growth and ground cover is achieved. So that is the motion before us. Are there any comments or questions concerning this request?
I do have one question, if that's all right. Not necessarily as it pertains to the motion itself, but the requirements of the owners of especially the Erinside project would be in addition to any requirements the DNR has, right? This is just simply for the city.
Yes, that is correct.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, we have to do everything the DNR tells us.
Right.
Does anyone wish to make a motion concerning motion 24-2?
I would move for a passage of motion 20-4-2, of 517 Erinside Road.
I'll second the motion.
Who is seconding it?
Greg.
Aye, thank you. Thank you. Aye, it's been moved and seconded to pass motion 24-2. Is there any further discussion?
I just have a comment. I'm all in favor of, making these kind of approvals versus adding additional conditional uses. We, as we created the zoning code over the course of all those years, we were assured that we would have the ability to change part of the code to make it also so that some of the concerns that Mr. Foster had with the previous applicant, we could do via changing the code to make part of this, simpler and more bearable for, the applicants and still be in compliance with the likes of the DNR and, our wishes as a plan commission. I'm still looking forward to the chance down the road to amend our code like we were promised we could do to avoid some of these issues, because I think what Mr. Foster said about the previous applicant has been true, all along, as far as, we do have some complications in the code that really cause applicants, I don't know, whatever, some kind of despair. But yet the code is there for city staff to enforce because we created it. So I just think it's important that we all realize that, there's going to be a time and a place that some of the code that we created may need amendments. And, not that we need one here, but I'm glad that it's brought up from time to time, just so that we're all aware that that's the vehicle that we can take to make staff's job easier and to limit the amount of conditional uses. So I think I just wanted this time to just reiterate that that has always been our option, but we haven't really taken it to that level yet. So I'm in favor of this procedure.
It's always been the option of the staff to bring certain issues that may be a little bit more complicated than the code recognizes without having to be a conditional use. We use you as a sounding board. You can put in input. I think anytime we're looking at issues on the lake and there is some level of area where it isn't absolutely clear, that you guys get a look at it, you kind of reinforce our opinions or tell us that we're off base. And I think that's an important option that we have and always have had. It's just that we don't normally see it. Normally we push these right to conditional use because historically they've been tied to a boathouse or some other larger expansion. The we are getting more reports of taking the landscaping off the 75-foot high watermark areas on lots, and so you may see more of these. Historically, it had happened. We went in, told them, and they came back with something. But now it's a little bit more complicated, and we're looking at it saying, hey, it's a good idea to have a little bit of a sounding board at a different level.
All right, very well. And this is something that we'll watch and see how things go, because as I understand it, it's more reflecting what the Plan Commission intent was and is today. Does anything? It has been moved and seconded to pass motion 24-2. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then we'll proceed with roll call vote on motion 24-2. Aye.
We can't hear.
We're just getting static from this.
There's some static.
Mr. Magnuson?
Aye.
Mr. Grady?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Homan?
Aye.
Mr. Schumacher?
Aye.
Mr. Coots?
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
All right, thank you. The next item is item number 8, discussion recommendation on an extraterritorial review of Boathouse Walkway and Landscape Plan, North 6787 Sunset Road, Parcel 018-0713-1113-004. And here, Mr. Wolf did go over this already, that this is before you, motion 24-3, Buckstein Stairway Replacement, North 6787 Sunset Road. The motion does set forth the city zoning authority extension within the extraterritorial zoning area, which includes regulation within 75 feet of the ordinary high water mark. The request for stairway replacement, lighting, rail, and related landscaping. The city review and tonight's public hearing. This motion does provide for a Plan Commission recommendation to the City Council to approve the request, subject to recommendations in the planner's memo. And Mr. Wolf, in his recommendation, that there be submitted a plant list and or landscape plan indicating plans the petitioner intends to use. Are there any comments or questions concerning this request or the proposed motion?
Yes. I don't believe that we intend to send this to the city council. This is just the Plan Commission's recommendation to the, so if that's in there, we'll probably need to cut that out.
All right, yes, it is. It is in both of these shoreline motions that the reference to the council is there. So, yeah, that would be a lot smoother process if this was sufficient in these two cases. So
yes, I believe.
Does this go to the Town of Lake Mills also for some review?
No.
This property in town, right?
This is in the town, but it wouldn't go to them for any review. In fact, it won't even go to the city council. It's a decision that the Plan Commission is saying, yes, you're interpreting the intent of the code correctly, and it applies the same in the city as it does in the town in the extraterritorial zoning area. So, all we're looking at is to say, hey, you guys agree with us, it's in writing, those motions should be amended to take out recommendation to the council and just literally a recommendation to staff that this is an appropriate action.
Mhm. All right. Is there, I think, just as a point of order, is there anyone who would like to make a motion to remove the reference to city council in both motion 24-2 and 24-3?
Also move. Wayne speaking.
All right, it's been moved by Mr. Magnuson
I'll second.
and seconded by Mr. Coots. Any discussion? All those in favor of this amendment to both motions signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, very well. All right. In that case, we'll go on with, was there a motion on the prepared motion 24-3? No, not yet. All right. Would anyone like to make a motion at this time as we
I'll
have
motion.
amended it?
I'll motion. This is Ryan Grady. I'll motion to approve motion 24-3, N6787 Sunset Road.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded by Mr. Coots. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, then we'll proceed with roll call vote.
Mr. Magnuson,
Aye.
Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Mr. Foster,
Aye.
Mr. Holman,
Aye.
Mr. Schumacher,
Aye.
Mr. Coots,
Aye.
Ms. Lazaris.
Aye.
Motion passed 7-0.
All right, thank you. The next item is number 9, recommendations on future agendas. Is there anything that should be discussed under that item?
I have one thing I'd like to say. I really appreciate all the effort you guys put in. It's been hard getting people to serve on the boards and committees, and having people who are willing to serve and put in the kind of time and go through the changes that we've gone through and have an exceptionally efficient virtual meeting tonight has been a joy. And I really wanted to let you guys know that I appreciate all the effort that you put in for the city.
We appreciate you, Mr. Wilkie. And I also appreciate each one of you. All right. Well, that brings us to item number 10, adjournment. Is there anyone who objects to adjourning the meeting? All right, hearing no objection, then the meeting is adjourned.